Greetings and salutations, all. I.S. Anderson here once again. You know, a lot of authors will talk about questions that they're asked on a regular basis, such as, where do you get your ideas from? What advice do you have for young writers? However, there is a question that they get asked often, or at least I get asked quite a few times, that they will never mention to anybody. A lot of people will actually come up to them saying, will you write my story for me? Now, I'm not going to talk about the pros and cons of ghostwriting today, how it goes, and this isn't a ghostwriting video. Instead, though, I want to talk about a particular incident I had where somebody wanted me to write their story. I don't remember the guy's name, but I remember the look of him, very visual. I remember the most memorable thing about this guy was that him exclaiming with great enthusiasm, "I'm a wizard!" Now, yes, there was a part of me that wanted to make a joke that involved the name Harry Potter or Merlin or Gandalf, but mostly I just stood there and with this type of a reaction. Okay. Now, it was at this point he explained to me that he did things like tarot readings and crystal gazing and palm reading and things along those lines. And he didn't have the ability to throw fireballs. He didn't say Wingardium Leviosa or anything like that. Which probably would have been a lot more interesting. Maybe I would have wrote a story about that guy. Or no, that has been done though, hasn't it? Now, believe it or not, I try to be open-minded about such things. I mean, I'm not saying if somebody tells me I can see your future and all that stuff, I'm going to automatically believe them. But I try to be a little bit more open-minded and try to not completely dismiss them right away. I mean, but don't get me wrong, I want some credibility. But anyway, the point is just that this guy thought he had an interesting enough story that he wanted to tell, but he wanted somebody else to write it for him. Now, this happened at a book show that I went to where I was presenting, my series, Modern Disciples. And so this guy was just going around, I guess, from table to table, looking for some author who is a sucker, excuse me, was willing to, write his story for him. And I remember, I mean, he wore a weird tourist hat. He had this like white T-shirt, these Hawaiian print shorts on, and he had white socks and sandals, and it's still Florida. But the thing is, he also had this like cane with him or a walking stick. It had the like a colored plastic ball on the end of it. He's walking around this stuff like he's I'm a wizard. But this guy, he comes waddling up to me with his cane or walking stick, whatever you want to call it. And he says, I'm a wizard and I want somebody to, tell the story of my life and all that stuff, doing people's tarot readings and all that stuff. Now, needless to say, I wasn't too interested in doing this. I mean, for several reasons. I mean, the guy's story behind the fact that I would have to actually work with this guy, put all that aside, and my feelings of ghostwriting aside, I was just thinking, working with this guy was going to be far more trouble than it was going to be worth, because he was probably going to either expect me to do this just out of the kindness of my own heart, and even if he did say he was going to pay me, it was probably going to be a real pain trying to get this money from him, and then even if he did, then he was going to just scrutinize over the story and say it wasn't good enough and all that stuff, and I just really did not want to write this guy's story. Now, some of you are probably thinking, well, then why didn't you just say, no thank you, I'm not interested, and he would have walked away. I tend to find that dealing with these people, just simply telling them no, it only leads to more problems like, well, why not? Why don't you want to do this? Or they try to talk you into it. And keep in mind, I'm in a public place, I'm at a show, people are walking by, looking at my books, I don't want them to see me get into an argument with this guy. So my mind went through a whole slew of things. I mean, watching his mannerisms, and the only words I ever heard from his mouth were, I'm a wizard. So basically, my mind goes through a whole slew of ideas on how to deal with this guy. Now, there was, of course, one part of me that was just saying to me, Just punch this guy in the throat and be done with it. Yeah, that probably would have made a much more interesting story, but fortunately I didn't go that route. There was another small part of me that wanted to do this. Fortunately, I didn't do that one either. Now, as I'm sitting there listening to this guy talk to me, telling his tales, like I said, I pretty much blocked him out because I was just so fascinated by this guy. And I realized the reason I was so fascinated by him is that because he actually believed this stuff. And again, I try to be open-minded about, the validity of these claims. But, I mean, he was just so gung-ho about this. I mean, he was just so interested in this. He really thinks that this is a real thing and all that stuff. And so finally, my brain actually came up with the perfect excuse to not write his story. Well, I don't think you really want me to write your story. I'm a fiction writer. And then all of a sudden, just immediately, I suddenly became a complete leper to this guy. I mean, he just says like, oh yeah, I don't want you, and then just waddled away to the next, waddled away into the next author that he came up to, and I'm a wizard! Now, do I think anybody would be willing to write his story? Absolutely not. I don't really think anybody would really want to. But the thing is, he was a very interesting character, so I figured, maybe I should make his effort worth a little bit of something. So I was in the middle of writing Volume 4 while this happened, and I was at a little bit of a loss for ideas on the story. I thought the story was so short, and I wanted to add more to it. I mean, as much as I'm an advocate for not putting stuff in just for the sake of making the story longer, my book was pretty short. So I figured, why not put this guy in my story somehow? So I made up this character called Henry, who, mysteriously walks up to the main protagonist of the stories, claiming, I'm a wizard, and all that stuff. Now, of course, in the world of modern disciples, these things are not meant to be dismissed. He may or may not have special abilities. Who knows? They do, I do sort of write in that he automatically knows that they're disciples, that they're descendants of gods. So, despite my personal feelings toward this guy, and despite the fact that, I don't think could possibly base a whole story around him, his efforts did mean something. I put this character based on him in my story, and based an entire chapter around him, and promptly killed him off before that chapter was ended. Killed him off in a rather gruesome fashion, too. I mean, I don't want to give away too many spoilers here, but let's just say the guy wasn't all there. So I guess the moral of the story is, don't be shy of authors. You never know, you might just end up in one of their stories, and meet a gruesome end at the same time. So just in case any of you are wondering, I have watched the first 4 episodes of Game of Thrones. I actually watched the first 4 episodes during the first or second week that they had been leaked out. So yes, I have seen all 4 episodes, and it is kind of veering away from the books quite a bit, isn't it? I personally don't mind that. I mean, as much as I don't want to be spoiled for the books that are coming out, whenever they come out, I do kind of like how the show does sort of veer off in its own direction. That way, both the book readers and the TV watchers, will get a surprise on it. They'll be on equal footing, so that's pretty cool. So if you have any questions to me about the show or anything Game of Thrones related, or anything related to this story, leave them in the comments below. I do usually answer people, assuming they leave their replies on. And as always, please put in contact information down below in the abyss. Please comment, rate, subscribe. You know the drill. And until next time, this is Isaac Sanderson telling everybody, make your lives great and have a good day. Thank you very much.